Welcome back, everyone, to the weekly Armchair Sports Talk podcast. Me and myself and Mark have returned podcast here today. I'm joined by a very special guest here today. We are joined by football finance expert Kieran Maguire from the Price of Football podcast. We're here today to talk all things Manchester United, but rather than talk about the old doom and gloom of results, tactical setups, we're here to talk about something way more interesting than that at the moment. Because we're in the transfer window, there's obviously a lot of, ifs, buts, and maybes about Man United's financial position and where we are as a football club. So I thought there'd be no better person to bring on the podcast than we did before, Mr. Kieran Maguire. We're going to talk all things Man United in terms of the financial side of things on the football club and the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on United's financial situation. First of all, Kieran, and welcome back to the podcast. Very good to have you back on again. How are you keeping?
I think it's fair to say that I'm keeping busy. I did over 600 interviews last year. I've practically got to that far this year, and we're only halfway through June. So there seems to be a lot of interest in football and finance, and I think fans are now becoming more aware of club owners. And I think one of the things it's really important to do is to distinguish the club from the club owner, because they're I played for Trafford Cricket Club for 30 years and shared a changing room with, it was half red, half blue. And what I think of the fans is one thing. What I might think of the owners is another.
Yeah, there's always a kind of great distinction, a great separation between ownership and football clubs. And for many football clubs, there's a great separation between the fans and the owners and kind of the ethos and thought process behind the football club. So I absolutely agree with you on that, Kieran. Mark, haven't seen you in quite some time. How are you keeping today? Are you well?
I'm okay. I'm actually losing my voice a little bit, so you have to bear with me. But as I said, yeah, I'm absolutely fine. Thank you very much.
That's very good. Great to hear, and great to have you back on here myself as well. Kieran, we previously spoke back in 2020. About from my remember, it was May 2020, just when Project Restart was kind of coming close, and we were talking about the financial situation of COVID-19 on football. 2 years removed from that now, obviously we're full stadiums are back. The football itself looks like it's getting back to normal. However, just from the Manchester United side of things, we did have a concern that the COVID-19 pandemic may, I suppose, hinder Manchester United's progress from a financial point of view, considering obviously the problems we've had with our debt, obviously in a number of years. Has COVID-19 had a massive effect on Manchester United's situation financially, considering the struggles the football club have had in terms of the Glazer ownership?
Yes, Manchester United are normally the biggest revenue generators from matchday income in the Premier League. Now, they have at times they've lost that crown to Arsenal. I think potentially in a full season they could now lose that crown to Spurs, because while Spurs' stadium's not as big, it's a lot more modern, and it's geared towards separating people from cash. And in my observation, the Glazer family have significantly underinvested in their property assets. But if you take a look at Project Big Picture, if you take a look at the Super League proposals, under both of those activities, they were effectively trying to get somebody else to finance capex at Old Trafford. But even so, United have certainly been hit, probably to the tune of around about 130, 140 million pounds in lost revenue as a result of Old Trafford being unable to play matches in front of fans, and that is a problem for all clubs. There are broadly two sets of clubs. There are clubs that have owners that are willing to say, well, if we're not getting money from X, we'll stick the money in. Don't have to name those clubs. We all know who they are. And then there's clubs such as Manchester United, for whom the owners take money out of the club rather than put money into the club, and that's in good years or bad. And that clearly puts Manchester United at a disadvantage.
Do you think, just quickly, do you think there's a much of a difference from the loss that Man United have made compared to other clubs, or do you think it would have impacted all clubs the same from a COVID perspective?
No, I think it has hit. It's hit the bigger clubs, certainly in sterling value overall, significantly more, because you've got clubs, and this is no disrespect to them. You've got clubs such as Burnley and Bournemouth who will earn only £4 out of every 100 from ticket sales. Now with United, it's considerably more than that. Whilst we know that Manchester United is a giant club in terms of its commercial and sponsorship appeal, it still generates over £100 million a year from ticket sales, and that's going to be far bigger than the vast majority of clubs in the Premier League. United do have the cushion of their commercial arrangements, but what we've seen over the course of the last 5 to 6 years is that they have been flatlining. I think Ed Woodward's comments that this club doesn't need to win matches to be commercially successful isn't necessarily the smartest thing that he said, and will be dug up on regular basis to criticise him, because I know I regularly dig it up myself.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that obviously there's been a lot of quotes out of the football club saying like we can do stuff only other clubs can dream of. Well, if other clubs can dream of getting money bled out of them and considerably, having over 500 million in debt, I don't think many clubs would dream of that. But yeah, like look, I think the way the pandemic has hit the club, like it has hit hard. Obviously, you said over 100 million kind of lost in match revenue that would hit. Yeah, it seems to be a situation where Manchester United are kind of struggling off the pitch, but also on the pitch as well. That's well documented, kind of what's happened at United in the last 12 months. Kieran, in terms of United, in terms of the financial side of things, obviously the on-field struggles this season has been quite worse than it has been over the last kind of 3 seasons. United had back-to-back top 4 finishes under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. This season, Solskjaer got sacked. Rangnick came in. We finished 6th in the Premier League, and probably lucky that Brighton beat West Ham United. They ended up in the Conference League, finishing 7th. United's share price at the moment is going down consistently, not only because on the field performances, but it also feels like the pressure that the Glazer family are feeling now from the fan protests and stuff like that. There seems to be a lot of unrest around Manchester United. Is the club now at a point where they're at a rebuilding process in terms of on the field, but off the field now as well? Is the club kind of in a crisis point?
I don't think crisis is the appropriate word, but I think there has to be perhaps one of 2 things happens. Either A, Manchester United accept that they're the new Arsenal, and Arsene Wenger used to say that finishing 4th was the equivalent of winning a trophy. Now, you're Manchester United fans. Is finishing 4th what you set out to achieve at the start of each season?
Absolutely not.
No.
Right. So, that's one thing. And then secondly, with the share price, and I do keep a fairly close eye on the share price. Manchester United's share price is below where it was when the Glazers took the club to the market in August 2012. So over the course of 10 years, Manchester United is now worth less in the markets than it was when the Glazers made such a song and dance about it. Now, clearly that's a relatively recent phenomenon, if we're honest, and the share price was as high as $21, I think, last November when some of the Glazers cashed in and made significant profits on the back of that. But what I think we've seen since, and I think this is an interesting thing, and I look at it sort of from a market's point of view. The markets don't care about football results. Okay, markets are markets. They're not football fans. They're in it for financial returns. What the markets look at is cash flow, and I think the assessment of the markets is that if Manchester United is to return to its former position as a club where being runners-up you weren't happy about, but you'd accept, then there needs to be significant investment. And that investment comes in 2 areas. First of all, it's infrastructure investment. It's investing in facilities. It's investing in the stadium, and there has been talk about that. But you then got to say, well, A, where is that money going to come from, and B, what is going to be the finance cost? Since the Glazers acquired Manchester United in 2005, and remember when they bought the club had cash in the bank, the club had no debt. In fact, the club generated interest as far as its bank account is concerned. But since the Glazers acquired the club in 2005, they have spent £837 million on bank interest. And that has reduced the amount of debt from 603 to 597 million pounds. So it's gone down. So they took out initial loans. They've reduced the debt by £6 million. It's the equivalent of taking out an interest-only mortgage, in effect. And we're still where we were in 2005. And that money is leaking out. Now, if I was a fan of Manchester United, ultimately, I don't care whether the money's going to a player or to an agent or to a bank, as long as they're delivering results. When the club is ceasing to deliver results, you then say, well, could that £837 million have been allocated in other resources in better ways? And again, you're the experts there. I can't talk. I know nothing about football, and that's the one thing I've learned from teaching it for years. I actually know not. The more I teach, the less I know in terms of what's happening on the pitch. But it could be argued that money could have been better spent in terms of player recruitment. It could have added to the budget, or it could have been invested in other projects, which would then allow the club to actually be generating a higher return.
I just on a couple of things you said, actually, it does concern me. Obviously, Ed Woodward did come out a couple of years ago and say, we don't always need to be winning every game in order to generate the commercial value, and I get that from a business perspective. But I've always thought that, as businessmen, which these people are deemed to be, I don't always think it's very sensible. I feel that, as you've also alluded to as well, if you're winning on the pitch, that is going to generate more, and surely that coincides really nicely with a cash flow which would generate you more, probably take out more dividends, probably spend more money, probably acquire. We know we've acquired the wrong players. It's not that they haven't spent money, but it just all seems to, it's just all a bit of a mess, and I really find that strange. But do you think that surely, if we were able to bring the on-field results back and get to the winning ways again, surely that would just be a benefit towards the Glazers and the club as a whole?
Yeah, I agree with you totally, and I'm not here to praise or criticise the Glazers. I don't think it's my job to do so. The money has been spent. That is without doubt. So on a quantitative basis, and I know the club has put out press releases to this extent, and they will say, well, we've got the highest net spend over the course of the last 5 years of any club in the Premier League, and that's actually true. So then there's two things about spending money. There's how much you spent, and there's how well you spent it. And it, as an outsider, I would say you've got to be concerned about the quality of decision making, because we're all where we are as a result of decisions that we make on a day-to-day basis. And how do you assess management? Well, you assess management in any business, and whether you can say, you can look at the Prime Minister as effectively he's the CEO of the government. You can assess him on the quality of his decisions. You can do it in corporate entities. We do it all the time for companies such as Apple. Well, the same thing applies to the board of Manchester United. For a club that has had a significant financial advantage over the course of the life of the Premier League, and that put Manchester United into a preeminent position. I think you have to question the wisdom of the decisions that have been made, and again, looking at I talk to people at clubs, might talk to people at Manchester United for all we know. I can't I'd rather not say, and they will say, well, we outbid City for Harry Maguire, we outbid City for Sanchez, we outbid City for Cristiano Ronaldo coming back. So we can still write out the checks. So then it comes to, well, okay, who's making the decisions, and do they have an overall strategy? And again, talking to people in the numbers game, I see that Manchester City, they're recruiting people who are astrophysicists, who are data scientists, who are analysts, and Manchester United appear to be recruiting on the basis of what the commercial department will think will sell the most number of shirts in terms of a name, or how's it going to fit in with particular geographical markets in terms of the popularity of players and Instagram and so on. And that is a different strategy. That has its own set of consequences, both off the field. Manchester United still generate incredible amounts of revenue from their commercial arrangements. It does have implications from what happens on the field. And I'm a Brighton fan. I don't want to talk about that match at the Amex, but normally when Brighton play Manchester United, the first thing you do is that you look at the lineups on both teams and you say, well, how many Brighton fans would get into the United team? And normally, if we've got one or two, and then that's probably me being biased towards Brighton, I'd be quite pleased. And I looked at those two sets of lineups and I thought, well, actually, I quite fancy us. I'm not being false about it. Yeah, we're Brighton. Yeah, we're nothing. And is that what Manchester United have come to? And that's looking at me from a fan point of view. And comparing the size of the squads that Manchester United have practically got a squad which is, I suspect when a couple of deals go through, they will be able to say, well, they've got the first £1 billion football squad. But how well it's been spent, I'd imagine you're far better positioned than I am to comment on that.
It's certainly not been spent very well. Sorry, Keane, just one more on the back of that. First of all, Brighton played fantastic that day, and I don't think you're biased in saying that maybe one or two players. I think all 11 would have been able to get into that team. United were poor. My other question is, can we ever move away from that? There's been a lot of talk, and I've certainly said it for the last couple of years. I know Keane has too. We tend to look at the more commercial value players. They like to get the players that are obviously going to generate a lot of interest, and therefore it obviously creates the money, whatever that is, that way. But do you think ever we will move away from that? Because we certainly need to be recruiting more sensibly now. I don't want to see 80, 90, other than maybe players like Frankie de Jong, being spent all the time. I want us to be a lot smarter. I was really hoping that obviously Ralph would give us that opportunity to do that, but consequently he's left as well. But do you think United will ever look at it differently, maybe more pragmatically, and try to invest more wisely? Because that's where, listen, I know people will shoot me for this, but it's not that United have not spent the money. I get that there's obviously leverage, there's debt, and there's all this. That isn't going to change for the foreseeable. Hopefully it gets better, doesn't get worse like Barcelona. But I just get so frustrated with what they've spent it on, and I think that's where fans are. But do you think we'll ever move away from that potentially?
I think it comes down to the culture of the club, and the culture of the club is set at the top. Now, I know the last thing you want me to do is to praise Manchester City and Liverpool, but I'm going to praise Manchester City and Liverpool here.
You should, yeah.
What FSG did when they came into Liverpool, they said, right, we cannot compete with Manchester United on a financial basis. So what we need to do is that we need to look at it from a Moneyball perspective, to recruit players. I hadn't. Sadio Mane, he looked a half decent player at Southampton. Yes, Salah, he looked okay, but they knew exactly what they were getting because they'd done their homework. They also identified where their weaknesses were, and they were prepared to spend big. So in terms of the football that Klopp wanted to play, you need a goalkeeper who's a sweeper keeper. That's what they've got. And Alisson is a magnificent keeper. De Gea is a fantastic goalkeeper, but that's all he does. He is not. He's not a sweeper keeper, and therefore that different style of football. So why are these things not being taken into consideration? They recruited Van Dijk. They paid big money for Van Dijk, but again they'd identified their weakness. With Manchester United, I don't see that. So the decision maker, what have they done? They've replaced Ed Woodward, who was a somebody who used to work at PwC, somebody that was a graduate of Bristol University, with Arnold, who is somebody who used to work at PwC, somebody who was a graduate of Bristol University. Is that going to change the culture of the club? I don't know. Unless I think the club has a reset and starts to believe that it's going to take a few years. But we've had the United are in transition excuse for 9 years since Sir Alex retired.
Time, too long.
Yeah. So that really doesn't wash. The constant changing of managers come in with a different culture. The new manager's coming in, he's saying all the right things. The sound bites sound good, but does he want control as far as the budget is concerned? Or is his role purely that of as a coach? That's what Klopp does. Klopp's a coach, Guardiola's a coach. And yes, they will be in discussions. And you look at the people at the top of those clubs. I see the people that are being recruited on LinkedIn, and I go, wow, that's thinking outside of the box, and I'm not seeing that at Manchester United.
You talked, sorry, Keane, sorry, buddy. You talked about the approach that Liverpool and obviously City take, and you're absolutely right. Listen, I both of us can't stand the clubs, but they are ran very, very well, and they've had for many years an analytical department, especially when FSG come in for Liverpool, where they look at a player for the attributes that they bring to the table. Salah, for example, wasn't their first choice. It was Julian Brandt from Dortmund at the time who went elsewhere, and they weren't able to afford him, so they went for Salah. Now, obviously, we knew him as a relatively average player, did very well at Roma, and obviously came to Liverpool, but absolutely suited that style perfectly, and he's now probably one of the best players in the world, and it's obviously very frustrating. I did hear that United were potentially bringing in an analytical department, and that could have been a couple of years ago. I heard that now, but nothing's actually come to fruition. So, you were right to point that out. Sorry, King, go for it, buddy.
Yeah, look, I think just on the back of what Kieran said in terms of the way City and Liverpool have been running their football clubs, in terms of what they're doing from the top, and again, I don't like the football clubs. I'm going to be plain simple. Being a United fan, they wouldn't be my cup of tea, but you have to look at the way they're running the clubs from top to bottom. And look, you mightn't agree with some of the ethics of what some of the people who are working at the clubs, but at the same time, you have to look at it and say, that's how a proper football club is being ran. You're looking at the situation at United. Look at situations at Barcelona, even at the moment. There's ways to run a football club. Unfortunately, if you look at the latter, that's not the right way to run a football club. And we're seeing the effects on both football clubs. Now, obviously, Barcelona are in a probably worse situation than what we are at the moment. But at the same time, we are where we are at the moment. And it's due to, again, I suppose, the culture been set from the top. And obviously, as I say, it always goes downhill from the top if the standards aren't set from there. Kieran, I've recently seen, just on your own Twitter, with regards to the European Super League. Obviously, 12 months ago, that was, I suppose, a massive insult to many Manchester United fans in terms of what the Glazers wanted to do with this football club, which did result in mass protests, and also the fans have, I suppose, had a bit of disconnect with Manchester United as a football club. When you look at the Glazers, Florentino Perez and co., obviously Super League is kind of, looks like it's going to be a thing of the past at the moment. Do you think with the current kind of, I suppose, the culture that they're trying to set for that in terms of taking competitiveness out of football, do you think that the likes of the Glazers and Florentino Perez and people like that will try this again? Or do you think maybe that new Champions League format, coming up, that, that might be, that I suppose, that fiasco may be settled?
I think as far as clubs in the Premier League is concerned, that ship has sailed, because all of the clubs involved have effectively given a commitment to not rejoin the any form of Super League. If we also make progress with regards to the recommendations of the fan-led review, and remember the Premier League are trying to water down those recommendations as we speak, then I think from a cultural perspective, it will be it's almost an impossible job. How can they say they've all sort of they've all said, oh, we've made mistakes, and we know that they're completely insincere and they're sorry for upsetting the fans. We all know that's utter nonsense, but they've got their fingers burned that they can't be seen to returning to it. Perez is different because I was working in Spain last month, and the attitude of I think Spanish fans was it wasn't great, but perhaps we should have given it a chance. But then the Spanish media is very much in the pockets of Real Madrid and Barcelona. Whilst I'm not keen on some of the papers in this country, regardless of where we stand on the political divide. The sports journalists in the main are pretty independent of the newspapers, and they're also pretty independent of the clubs. And remember, had it not been for journalists leaking the story, there's a genuine danger that we might be sitting here with the Super League about to start in 6 weeks' time. So the Glazers weren't happy. The markets weren't happy. When Super League was announced, Manchester United share price went up in one direction only. Because from the market's point of view, you take a look at the Super League. No relegation. Manchester United didn't have to win matches to qualify. Wages being capped at 55% of revenue. No transfers between clubs in the Super League, which meant that agents couldn't barter one club off against another. It was all geared to making a lot more money for investors, for shareholders, and for owners.
It's one of them where they're almost trying to create that closed shop mentality, and I think it would have damaged not just United, but I think football in general. It would have really, from I suppose grassroots football, it really would have harmed that as well, in my opinion as well, in terms of what would have happened there. But I'm glad, obviously that there's agreement there that obviously English clubs can't go ahead with that, and look, hopefully, going forward, and maybe in the future, in years' time, this we look back at, and hopefully it's forgotten about, and hopefully we can get something, better from this situation. And that's what's kind of leading me on to my next question, Kieran. In terms of, we've seen, I suppose, a lot of turmoil at Chelsea. Obviously, the Roman Abramovich situation happened. They had to sell up, and they had a lot of bids coming in for him. Jim Ratcliffe was a known Manchester United fan, Kieran. Had a failed bid for Chelsea. Now, obviously, Chelsea are bought for over £4 billion, and obviously that's a massive thing for that football club. When you consider Chelsea being bought for that much, and obviously Radcliffe subsequently putting in a bid for Chelsea, does that send signals to the Glazers that that there is people out there who may be willing to maybe put in a bid for Manchester United in the future, or maybe Radcliffe himself, maybe having discussions with him and maybe trying to see if there's anything that maybe can be done maybe in the future?
Yeah, look, the Glazers don't love football. They don't love Manchester United. They love money. So it comes down to a question of price. Now, if somebody comes in with an offer which meets their valuation, which meets their financial expectations, then I think they're duty bound. I think Joel Glazer does like he is very much hands on as far as the club is concerned. But the rest of the family are, they can take it or leave it. They'll cash in their dividends each year and go on their merry way. So it is a monetary issue. Certainly, if we take a look at the value of Manchester United shares today, you could come in if you offer 40-50% more than the current trading price. You could still buy Manchester United for £2.5 billion. You add on the value of the debt, you're buying United for £3 billion. That looks okay. That looks like a reasonable price. Then, of course, perhaps you do need to factor in that we need to invest, which will increase things. But the chatter that I hear, and also the fact that at present, and this wouldn't work in favour of Jim Ratcliffe, but I talk to a lot of people in the States, and sterling is suffering at present due to the economic malaise in this country. I know it's not much better in the States, but it's a bit better. So Sterling is cheap, which means that Manchester United becomes cheaper, and it does become a potential purchase. Jim Ratcliffe, he's a really interesting guy. You know, he's incredibly successful. I think he's enjoyed what he's achieved as far as cycling is concerned. But no disrespect, it's cycling. You know, it's not football. It's not going to give you the same degree of attention that you'll get 365 days a year from owning a club such as Manchester United. He's an Oldham lad. He's now 70. You know, if I was the richest man in the country and 70 years old, I'd be thinking to myself, how do I want to be remembered? You know, what's my legacy going to be? And I think the appeal of being the man who rescued Manchester United, the man that returned Manchester United to its former glories for a lad from Oldham, you know, I'd be thinking, well, let's just see what else we can do. You know, it could be that the Glazers will play hardball and ask for a price too high, but if he was serious about Chelsea, and I think we have to ask, you know, was he genuinely serious? Was he just doing a little bit of stirring? Because you know, his offer came in sort of very much at the end. He didn't appear to have gone through the sources and the hoops that some of the other people had. And his brother, in fact, you know, at the start of the bidding process, said, "Oh no, we're not getting involved in something like that. You know, it's a waste of money." So I can see the benefits to him. You know, he doesn't need the cash. He can run the club as a sort of a personal fiefdom in the way that we've seen other clubs where we've got owners. You know, Abramovich. You know, you can't say anything positive about Abramovich. He's too closely linked to Putin. But if you're a Chelsea fan, you know, he spent £900,000 a week of his own money for 19 years propping up that club. Well, you know, that was a game changer for Chelsea. I don't think Jim Ratcliffe would do it to the same extent at Manchester United, but I'm not sure that he has to do it to the same extent, because Manchester United are a bigger club than Chelsea in terms of matchday income, in terms of commercial appeal, and so on. And you know, the one thing that Chelsea's got is it's in London, and it's in a very sexy part of London. But you know, I used to live in Knutsford. You know, there's nice places. There's nice places in the northwest.
Yeah. Just a couple of comments on the back of that. Actually, I had this conversation a few months ago, and in agreement with what you said, absolutely, because nobody comes in late for a bid. He would have known exactly what he was doing. He's a shrewd businessman. Nobody comes in. I mean, I don't know if you saw the interview that he did. He even, these questions, before he had those questions in that interview, would have been vetted. He knew what would have been coming, but he still brought up Manchester United's name and said, "Oh no, they're not attainable at the moment," or whatever it was that he said. And that to me made me believe that there was genuine interest. And I think obviously we're all very much aware Jim's a massive Man United fan, and I would be more than happy. And I absolutely agree with what you said as well, in the fact that I believe anybody that comes in to take over this club will view it as a view to rescue Manchester United, and that would be wonderful. But that's it from me, Keane.
Yeah, like I think the appeal to be that person to rescue United, I think, is something that would be there for anyone to come in, anyone who's a footballing person and has a lot of money. That would set your legacy in stone in time, and whoever it is, that person to save our football club, you know, from the Glazers and from this dark time, the football club, it'd be right up there with Sir Alex, so building that dynasty that he did. And obviously Sir Matt Busby and what he did after the Munich air disaster and what he done to rebuild the football club. That, like, you know, it could create, you know, like I suppose a third wave of history in Manchester United, because obviously what Sir Matt and what Sir Alex did, you know, was unbelievable, and that will always be remembered. And if someone can come in and take us, you know, back to where we were, I think that'd be something that set, not only I suppose from a monetary perspective, they would make a lot of money for getting United back to their glory, but to have that legacy, I think that's something that, you know, that live on not only in their history but in their families as well, and obviously continuing something, Joe, that is Joe as big as Manchester United would be absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah, I agree with you entirely. It certainly has some pluses. It comes down to money. You know, how much is he willing to pay? how much are the Glazers demanding? And certainly every time somebody does approach them, the first reaction is, no, we're not interested in selling. Now that could be a strategy. That could be a negotiation ploy for all we know. But,
Definitely. I look at it as well, like you're
see.
taking 11 million dividend a year, and someone comes in with a good offer. Like, what's the point? What's the point in collecting that 11 million or whatever, how much it is dividend a year when someone could come in with a really appealing offer? Like, I think that's where there is potentially room for this football club to be bought.
Yes, and there are there are US franchises which might be attractive to the Glazers, where they could reinvest the money that they would have made from Manchester United, and they will walk away with a lot of money, because remember, it was bought for £700 million. Most of that was in the form of debt, so they put in very, very little, and they could certainly walk away with huge multiples of their original investment, on top of the management charges, on top of dividends on a 6 monthly basis, as you said, of £11 million.
Just a final thing from me, just very quickly. Obviously, Chelsea was bought for just above 4 billion, which to me, obviously, as you've alluded to as well, would probably suggest that United is probably worth more than that, maybe close to 5 billion. Now, with that in mind, and the debt that United have as well, what do you think could be enough to coerce the Glazers into selling this sort of figure?
Well, I think there's been a bit of a misconception with Chelsea. What's happened is that Chelsea were bought for £2.5 million, and then they say, it's a bit like if you buy a house for 200 grand, and then you say, well, I'm going to spend 100 grand tarting it up. The original cost is still 200 grand. So I think you could buy Manchester United from the Glazers for somewhere in the region of 2.5 to 3 bill. That's still substantially higher than where we are today as far as its market capitalization. If you go onto Yahoo Finance, and it will have lots of little tickers, one of them which says market cap. I've got a very talented dog who's just opened the door.
Very. My dog does that too.
Yes. Can't close it though. That's the downside. So I think that there are people involved now. Are we going to see that from nation states? Are we going to see it from the equivalent of what we've seen at Newcastle, from what we've seen at PSG and Manchester City? There's relatively few nation states that I think that are left in a position to do that. So therefore, we are looking at two potential areas. First of all, we would be considering ultra high net worth individuals, people such as Jim Ratcliffe. There's plenty of them around. Just look at the Sunday Times rich list, which came out a few weeks ago, both domestically and overseas. And then we come to private equity. Private equity is all about realizing value in a club. And if private equity companies feel that Manchester United is undervalued, that there's additional money to be made from NFTs, fan tokens, and so on. Now, look, I'm not a fan of those whatsoever, but look at it from their point of view. Manchester United in 2019, pre-COVID, generated £627 million. Manchester United, according to Manchester United, has 1.1 billion fans on the planet. So therefore, United are making 57 pence per fan per year. And we can come up with something which can turn that 57 pence even to £1. All of a sudden, you've got a massively profitable club. So I think that's where the markets are looking. The private equity companies are looking. Can we do something? And there's a lot of talk about Web3, the metaverse, effectively, putting on your silly headset and all of a sudden you're there. You've got a virtual reality relationship with Old Trafford. You can be there with your mates and so on. I'm old school. For me, it's all about going there with my real friends, going to the pub beforehand, having a sing song, moaning afterwards. That's
my routine as well.
That collegiate part of football. But if I'm in Indonesia, if I'm in Nigeria, if I'm in Australia, and I'm a Manchester United fan, you can't do that anyway. So could this be a way of extracting more money from fans? With the technology's perhaps not quite there yet, but think about where we've come in terms of technology over the course of the last decade. In a few years' time, it might be the way that we consume football, especially if you've got a global fan base such as Manchester United.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of avenues, I think, that can definitely increase revenue streams for us as a football club, going forward. And look, hopefully happens post Glazers rather than pre Glazers, because as much as I'd like to see our club make money and obviously prosper on and off the pitch, I don't want to see them make anything, and that's just my personal feelings towards them as owners. And I'm just hopeful. I think many United fans are hopeful that this situation does change over time. But Kieran, we are going to wrap it up there for this afternoon. Thanks very much for coming on today. It's massively appreciated, and we do appreciate the insight that you do give us. Guys, just for Kieran's podcast as well, you can drop down the video link description and the Price of Football podcast, brilliant football finance podcast. They covered not just obviously Premier League, but the wide landscape of football in terms of the finance side of things. So do check that out as well. And also smash that like button. And we really do appreciate all of your support. But thanks very much for Kieran and also for Mark for joining me here this afternoon. As always, I hope you all have a good day. And look, Premier League fixtures are announced tomorrow. So look, hopefully Manchester United versus Brighton. First game of the season, hopefully, and hopefully not repeat the 4-0 that happened there a couple of weeks ago. Kieran, we might get you on for a preview, talk about the football insides of Manchester United and Brighton.
Thanks very much, guys. Stay safe, everybody.
No worries. Thanks very much, guys, and hope you all have a good day.